Well, according to Forbes, there are just over 600 billionaires in the United States. 3 of them could now be running for president. CBS News has confirmed that former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg is taking steps to enter the 2020 presidential race, but still hasn't decided if he'll run. He has dispatched aides to Alabama to file paperwork to enter the state's Democratic primary. And before entering politics, the 77-year-old co-founded a financial services company. His Bloomberg system is known for delivering analytics and news worldwide. In New Hampshire today, Joe Biden welcomed the ex-mayor into the race. The former vice president also pushed back on the idea that Bloomberg, because of his lagging poll numbers, has decided to enter.
With regard to Michael Bloomberg, I welcome him in the race. Michael's a solid guy, and let's see where it goes. I have no problem with him getting in the race. And in terms of he's running because of me, last polls I looked at, I'm pretty far ahead. And also in all those states that are the early states that we have to win back. If I'm not mistaken, I'm doing pretty well, both relative to Trump and relative to all the people running in the Democratic primary.
CBS News political correspondent Ed O'Keefe has more on Bloomberg's history and why he could be joining the field now.
This country is in real trouble. We need somebody to pull people together.
Just last week, former Mayor Michael Bloomberg said he had doubts about the current Democratic presidential contenders.
I have my reservations about the people running and the way they're campaigning and the promises they're making that they can't fulfill.
Now, after spending millions to help Democrats win elections across the country, he's seriously considering a bid of his own. In a statement, a spokesman says, "We now need to finish the job and ensure that Trump is defeated." But Mike is increasingly concerned that the current field of candidates is not well positioned to do that.
Under Mike Bloomberg's tenure.
In September, he told CBS This Morning he was staying out of the 2020 race, partly because former Vice President Joe Biden was leading a crowded field.
Are you sitting here going, I wish I had done it?
No, I never think back. There was not a road for me when Joe was in the race to get through, because we would have split the votes.
But recent polling shows Biden is slipping behind liberals Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders and moderate Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg. Bloomberg is a former registered Republican and independent who rejoined the Democratic Party just last year.
How about a possible presidential run?
He's been mentioned as a possible presidential candidate since 2008. In 2016, he backed Hillary Clinton and attacked then-candidate Donald Trump.
I'm a New Yorker, and I know a con when I see one.
CBSN political reporter Caitlin Huey-Burns joins me now with more. So, Caitlin, what are the Democratic candidates saying about this?
Well, they're not too thrilled, as you can imagine. There are already too many people in the race, they think, and voters think so as well. I can say that, we've talked a lot about how we've been reporting on the ground in a lot of these early states, and we just really haven't heard any clamoring for anybody else to get in the race. People are actually pretty overwhelmed with the choices they have now. 2 people, though, who seem to be excited about Bloomberg's entry are Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, because they want to welcome a billionaire as kind of the punching bag for the race, because they are both, attacking billionaires as part of their campaign strategy.
Speaking of attacking billionaires, according to Warren's calculator, Bloomberg is worth $3.1 billion next year would pay under her wealth tax plan. That's a lot of money,
yeah.
Right? Is it safe to say that Bloomberg's policies would look different than hers?
It is very safe to say that, and that's why you can imagine. We've already seen this with Tom Steyer getting into the race and others who have been spending a lot of their own money. This is a time in the Democratic Party the emphasis is on the grassroots and the middle class and policies that affect the middle class. And so Bloomberg would have some serious, significant past policies that would be problematic in this primary. Not only being a billionaire, but as a mayor of New York City, supported things like stop and frisk. Of course, criminal justice is a huge issue in this primary. That is something that could come up over and over. On the other hand, since leaving the mayor's office, he has become very involved in Democratic politics, spending a lot of money on things like climate change and gun control. So that's something that he would be pushing for as well.
We heard in Ed's piece, Bloomberg talk a little bit about Ed talk a little bit about Biden underperforming at this point. Why do you think it is that he's chosen to jump in at this point now?
Well, from what we saw from Bloomberg's spokesman yesterday, there is this sense, at least at this point, that the candidates in the race right now are not doing as well as Bloomberg might have predicted that they would. And so this could be taken as a sign of Biden, who is the front runner in the moderate lane, having some weaknesses that other candidates could see an opening for. And that's what Bloomberg seems to be suggesting, and especially if he does decide to actually go through with this.
What about third party? Do you see him running potentially?
You know, in 2016, he wrote an op-ed saying that he wasn't going to wage a third-party bid because of the effect that it could have on the actual election. And it would be hard to see him doing that now, knowing that what he has said is that his ultimate goal is defeating Donald Trump. And we know that third-party candidacies could ultimately upset that, just given tradition. So we'll see. But there are questions about, you know, given the potential weaknesses of some of the frontrunners in this race. We talked about Joe Biden, but also there are questions about Elizabeth Warren that some Democrats have about being able to defeat Donald Trump. That's when you're seeing some Democrats in the party kind of start to second guess some of these choices.
Is there anybody else that you think who could throw in their hat at this point that you're watching?
You know, it's a really good question because we're so close. We're only 3 months away from the Iowa caucuses. So traditionally, you would say that this is way too late for anybody to get in, to be able to have an organization, to raise money. This is what separates Bloomberg from some other candidates who could have maybe gotten in later, is that he has a lot of money and he plans on self-funding if he does indeed decide to do this. So that's a huge factor. So I can't see anybody else, you know, aside Bloomberg, getting in at this point.
Okay. And Caitlin, by the way, I want to flag, you've got a great article I was just reading this morning on CBSNews.com. It's titled "The 5 Big Things You Need to Understand About the Democratic Party Right Now."
Yeah. We've spent a lot of time on the ground over the past several weeks, and especially in places like Iowa, where all these campaigns seem to be centered. So just a few things to flag as people are trying to assess all of this. The biggest thing that I found is that the knife sharpening phase is upon us. This is a time that, you know, we've seen these passive aggressive kind of attacks that the candidates have been waging. Now you see them going full bore against each other. So Biden going after Warren, Warren going after Biden, Buttigieg going after Warren, Warren going after Buttigieg. This is the phase where, to borrow a phrase from the real world, I know you'll appreciate this, that, you know, people stop being polite and start getting real. So that's this phase. We also heard a lot of people in Iowa, at least, say that I love Joe Biden. He was a great VP, but they have real reservations with his campaign. And that's why you're seeing energy around Buttigieg and Warren. It's also a time that campaigns are shaking up and breaking up altogether. Beto O'Rourke, of course, folded his campaign. Kamala Harris is reassessing. And a lot of people in Iowa are trying to evoke Obama from 2007, 2008, trying to kind of recreate some of those conditions that allowed for him to kind of rise up. And finally, my most favorite quote that I've collected on the trail so far, which I think says so much about where we are, is one man in Ames told me that I'm an Iowan, so I haven't decided yet.
That is a good quote.
So that's kind of helping to fuel some of these underdog candidacies, knowing that people are still making up their minds.
I have to tell you, that always surprises me when you go out there and you do reports for us, and then you say there's so many people still who have not decided.
Exactly. They've narrowed it down to like 4 candidates, but that's still a lot. And we see that in polling too, that about half of the people are still making up their minds.
All right, Caitlin Huey-Burns, thank you so much.
Take
a look at that article. It's very fascinating.
Thank you.
Thank you.